All right. This is bad. I just yeah. I couldn't. Yeah. I kind of just wanted to come back. All right. Anyways, uh, many divorced people fall into a similar pattern. They are still consumed with anger and bitterness and self-justification regarding an ex-spouse. In a negative sense, psychologically, 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 they are still married. They need, they each need the weakness excuse me, they each need the weaknesses of the former partner to justify their accusations. Many older excuse me, many older children go through life either secretly or openly hating their parents. They blame them for past abuses, neglect, or favoritism, and they center their adult life on that hatred, living out the reactive, justifying script that accompanies it, that accompanies it, that accompanies it, that accompanies. Many older children go through life either secretly or openly hating their parents. They blame them for past abuses, neglect, or favoritism, and they center their adult life on that hatred, living out the reactive justifying script that accompanies it. The individual who is friend or enemy the individual who is friend or enemy centered has no intrinsic security. Feelings of self-worth are volatile, a function of the emotional state or behavior of other people. Guidance comes from the person's perception of how others will respond, and wisdom is limited by the social lens or by an enemy-centered paranoia. The individual has no power. Other people are pulling the strings. Guidance comes from the person's perception of how others will respond, and wisdom is limited by the social lens or by an enemy centered paranoia. The individual has no power. Other people are pulling the strings. 음, 근데 this is hmm, I would have to think more about it. I agree on this, but I don't know what to say. Church centeredness. I believe that almost everyone who is seriously involved in any church will recognize that church going is not synonymous with spirituality, with personal spirituality. Will recognize that church going is not synonymous with will recognize that church going is not synonymous with personal spirituality. Synonymous with personal spirituality. There are some people who get so busy in church worship and projects that they become insensitive to the pressing human needs that surround them, contradicting the very precepts they profess to they profess to believe deeply. They profess to believe. They profess to they profess to believe. Profess Profess to believe. Fess to believe. They profess to believe deeply, contradicting the very precepts contradicting the very precepts they 여기가 어렵네. contradicting the contradicting the very precepts they profess to believe deeply. Precepts they profess. It's like rapping. It's difficult. Contradicting the very precepts they profess to believe deeply. Contradicting the very contradicting the very precepts they profess to believe deeply. Yeah, I think I gotta read a lot slower. Contradicting the very precepts they profess to believe deeply. Contradicting the very precepts they profess to believe deeply. There are others. There are others who attend church less frequently or not at all, but whose attitudes and behavior reflect a more genuine centering in the principles of the basic Judeo Christian ethic. There are others who attend church less frequently or not at all, but whose attitudes and behavior reflect a more genuine centering in the principles of the basic Judeo-Christian ethic, of the basic Judeo-Christian ethic. All right, I'm gonna read the two sentences again until I get them not entirely correct, but this is one of the reasons why on the first video you guys may have seen me read a paragraph for like 20 times. I'm not gonna do that. There are some people who will get there are some people who get so busy in church worship and projects that they become insensitive to the pressing human needs that surround them, contradicting the very precepts they profess to believe deeply. There are others who attend church less frequently or not at all, but whose attitudes and behavior reflect a more genuine centering in the principles of the basic Judeo-Christian ethic. Of the basic Judeo-Christian ethic. Having participated throughout my life in organized church and Having participated throughout my life in organized church and community, having participated throughout my life in organized church and community service groups, I have found that attending church does not necessarily mean living the principles taught in those meetings. You can be active in a church, but inactive in its gospel. In the church-centered life, image or appearance can become a person's dormant consideration. In the church-centered life, image or appearance can become a person's dominant consideration, leading to hypocrisy that undermines personal security and intrinsic worth. And intrinsic worth. 진짜 어렵네. That undermines personal security and intrinsic worth. Guidance comes from a social conscious, and the church-centered person tends to label others artificially, artificially, and the church-centered person tends to label others artificially in terms of active, inactive, liberal, orthodox, or conservative. Because the church is a formal organization made up of policies, programs, practices, and people, it cannot by itself give a person any deep, permanent security or sense of intrinsic worth. Living the principles taught by the church can do this, but the organization alone cannot. Nor can the church give a person a constant sense of guidance. Church centered people often tend to live in compartments, acting and thinking and feeling in certain ways on the Sabbath and in totally different ways on weekends. Such a lack of wholeness or unity or integrity is a further threat to security, creating the need for increased labeling and self-justifying. Such a lack of wholeness or unity. I'm rereading the past tense, by the way. Such a lack of such a lack of wholeness or unity or integrity, unity. Such a lack of wholeness or unity or integrity is a further threat to security. Is a further threat, further, further, further threat. Am I pronouncing that right? Further threat. Such a lack of wholeness or unity, such a lack of wholeness or unity or integrity is a further threat to security, creating the need for increased labeling and self-justifying, seeing the church as an end rather than as a means to an end, undermines a person's wisdom and sense of balance. Although the church claims to teach people about the source of power, it does not claim to be that power itself. It claims to be the one it claims to be one vehicle through which divine power can be channeled into man's nature. Self-chartedness, Perhaps the most common center today is the self. The most obvious form is selfishness, which violates the values of most people. But if we look closely at many of the popular approaches to growth and self fulfillment, we often find self centering at their core. There is little security, guidance, wisdom, or power in the limited center of self. Let me reread that again. There is little security, guidance, wisdom, or power in the limited center of self. Like the Dead Sea in Palestine, it accepts but it never gives. It becomes stagnant. On the other hand, paying attention to the development of self in the greater perspective. On the other hand, paying attention to the development of self and the greater perspective of improving one's ability to serve, to produce, to contribute in meaningful ways gives context for dramatic increase in the four life support factors. Huh. There are some of the more common centers from which people approach life. It is often much easier to recognize the center of someone else's life than to see it in your own. You probably know someone who makes excuse me. You probably know someone who puts making money ahead of everything else. You probably know of someone uh, you probably know someone whose energy is devoted to justifying his or her position in an ongoing negative relationship. If you look, you can sometimes see beyond if you look, you can sometimes see beyond behavior into the center that creates it, identifying your center. But where do you stand? What is at the center of your own life? Sometimes that isn't easy to see, and I wholeheartedly agree. I don't know. Perhaps the best way to identify your own center is to look closely at your life support factors. If you can identify with one or whoa, okay, one or more of the descriptions in the charts on pages 133 to 135, you can trace it back to the center from which it flows. A center that may be limiting your personal effectiveness. More often than not, a person's center is some combination of these and or other centers. Okay, I'm gonna look at that. Also, let me quit Steam because this thing is constantly giving notifications. That's what the thing is. This thing right here, the thing that appears on the where the time clock thing is. Okay, I don't. Okay. I don't know if I can kind of show this. If you are spouse centered, if you're spouse centered, your feelings of security are based on the way your spouse treats you. You're highly you're highly vulnerable to the moods and feelings of your spouse. There is deep disappointment resulting. There is deep disappointment resulting in withdrawal or conflict when your spouse disagrees with you or does not meet your expectation. Anything that may impinge on the relationship is perceived as a threat. Your direction comes from your own needs and wants and from those of your spouse. Your decision making criterion is limited to what you think is best for your marriage or for your mate, or to the preferences and opinions of your spouse. Your life perspective surrounds things that may positively or negatively influence your spouse or your relationship. Your power to act is limited by weaknesses in your spouse and in self. If you are family centered, your security is found on family acceptance and fulfilling family expectations. Your sense of personal security is as volatile as the family. Your feelings of self worth are based on the family reputation. Family scripting is your source of correct attitudes and behaviors. Your decision making criterion is what is good for the family or what family members want. You interpret all of life in terms of your family, creating a partial creating a partial understanding and family narcissism. Your actions are limited by family models and traditions. Your personal worth is determined by your net worth. You are vulnerable to anything that threatens your economic security. Profit is your decision making criterion. Okay? Your security is a function of the social mirror. You are highly dependent on the opinions of others. Your decision making criterion is what will they think. You are easily embarrassed. You see the world through a social lens. You are limited in by your social comfort zone. Your actions are as fickle as opinion. Wow, I'm like really centered on a lot of things. That's wild. Did this thing just stop recording? Okay. Okay, never mind. Jesus. Alright, I'm gonna go back reading. Depending on external or internal conditions, one particular center may be activated until the underlying needs are satisfied. Then another center becomes the compelling force. As a person fluctuates from one center to another, the resulting relativism, 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 relativism. As a person fluctuates from one center to another, the resulting relativism, relativism. That's a hard word to pronounce. The resulting relativism is like roller coasting through life. One moment you're high, the next moment you're low, making efforts to compensate for one's weakness by borrowing strength from another weakness. There is no consistent sense of direction, no persistent wisdom, no steady power supply or sense of personal intrinsic worth and identity. The ideal, of course, is to create one clear center from which you consistently derive a high degree of security, guidance, wisdom, and power, empowering your proactivity and giving congruency and harmony to every part of your life. You're doing it. We are reading, and hey, it doesn't matter how long it takes for me to read, right? Hmm. A principle center. By centering our lives on correct principles, we create a solid foundation for development of the four life support factors. Our security comes from knowing that unlike other centers based on people or things that are subject to frequent and immediate change, correct principles do not change. We can depend on them. Principles don't react to anything. They don't get mad and treat us differently. They won't divorce us or run away with our best friend. They aren't out to get us. They can't pave our way with shortcuts and quick fixes. They don't depend on the behavior of others, the environment, or the current fad for their validity, for their or the current fad for their validity, for their validity. Okay, I'm gonna reread that sentence. They don't depend on the behavior of others, the environment, or the current fad for their validity. For the validity. Oh, validity, no. They or the current fad for the validity. For the validity. For their validity. For their validity. For their validity. They don't depend on the behavior or others, the environment, or the current fad for the validity. Principles don't die. They aren't here one day and gone the next. They can't be destroyed by fire, earthquake, or theft. Principles are deep, fundamental truths, classic truths, generic, common denominators. They are high. They are tightly inter interwoven. Inter is that how you pronounce it? Interwoven. Interwoven. Okay. I'm gonna search up how to pronounce that. Interwoven, 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 interwoven. Oh, interwoven, interwoven, interwoven. Oh, okay, interwoven, 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 interwoven. Right? Interwoven, interwoven. Okay, interwoven, 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 interwoven. All right, where's the word? Where's the sentence? Hello, interwoven. Okay. They are tightly interwoven threads, running with exactness, consistency, beauty, and strength through the fabric of life. Even in the midst of people or circumstances that seem to ignore the principles, we can be secure in the knowledge that principles are bigger than people or circumstances, and that thousands of years of history have seen them triumph, time and time again. Even more important, we can be secure in the knowledge that we can validate them in our own lives by our own experience. Admittedly, we are not omniscient. We are not omniscient. Admittedly, we're not omniscient. Our knowledge and understanding of correct principles is limited by our own lack of awareness of our true nature and the world around us, and by the flood of trendy philosophies and theories that are not in harmony with the correct principles. That's a long sentence. these ideas will have their these ideas will have their season of acceptance, but like many before them, they won't endure because they're built on false foundations. Let me reread that. These ideas will have their season of acceptance, but like many before them, they won't endure because they're built on false foundations. We are limited, but we can push back the borders but we can push back the borders of our limitations and understanding of the principles of our own growth. An understanding of we are limited, but we can push back the borders of our limitations. But we can push back the borders of our limitations. An understanding of the principles of our own growth enables us to search out correct principles with confidence that the more we learn, the more clearly we can focus the lens through which we see the world. The principles don't change. Our understanding of them our understanding of them does. The wisdom and guidance that accompany principle centered living come from correct maps, from the way things really are. From the way things really are, have been, and will be. Correct maps enable us to clearly see where we want to go and how to get there. We can make our decisions using the correct data that will make their implementations, that will make their we can make our decisions. We can make our decisions. we can make our decisions We can make our decisions using the correct data that will make their implementation possible and meaningful. We can make our decisions using the correct data that will make their implementation possible and meaningful. The personal power that comes from principle-centered living. The personal power that comes from principle-centered living is the power of a self-aware, knowledgeable, proactive individual, unrestricted by the attitudes, behaviors, and actions of others, or by many of the circumstances and environmental influences that limit other people. Is my voice really low? I don't know. Is it? Ah, 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 ah. Okay. Hopefully, principles always have natural consequences. Excuse me. The only real limitation of power is the natural consequences of the principles themselves. We are free to choose our actions based on our knowledge of correct principles, but we are not free to choose the consequences of those actions. Remember, if you pick up one end of the stick, if you pick up one end of the stick, you pick up the other. Yep. Principles always have natural consequences attached to them. Principles always have natural consequences attached to them. There are positive consequences. There are positive consequences which live in harmony, which when we live in harmony with the principles. There are positive consequences when we live with harmony. There are positive consequences. There are positive consequences when we live in harmony with the principles. There are negative consequences when we ignore them. But because these principles apply to everyone, whether or not they are aware, this is whether or not they are aware, this limitation is universal. And the more we know of correct principles, the greater is our personal freedom to act wisely. By centering our lives on timeless, unchanging principles, we create we create a fundamental paradigm of effective living. It is a center that puts all other centers in perspective. Remember that your paradigm is the source from which your attitudes and behaviors flow. A paradigm is like a pair of glasses. It affects the way you see everything in your life. If you look at things through the paradigm of correct principles, what you see in life is dramatically different from what you see through any other center. From If you look at things through the paradigm of correct principles, what you see in life is dramatically different from what you see through other from what you see through any other center from what you see through other any other centered paradigm. This is difficult, man. Did I tell you guys that I have a fat tongue? Uh, I searched online on because apparently if you have a fat tongue, it it is a little bit harder. It is a little bit harder to pronounce words. Um, and apparently there's a medical condition for it. It's called macroglossia. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right. Excuse me. And I don't know if I will. If I would talk without my tongue. Actually, what am I doing? I think my tongue is regularly it's like normal sized. Maybe a little bit bigger. I don't know. Also, I think not. I think. Um. Oh, actually, I shouldn't be talking about this. Ooh, that was close. I was about to say something personal. On the job, um, when you apply for jobs, they have, do you have any disabilities? And they kind of actually went, whoa. Okay. Um, for a quick understanding of the difference your center makes, let's look at one. Let's look at just one example of a specific problem as seen through the different paradigms. As you read, try to put on each pair of glasses. Try to feel the response that flows from the different centers. Try to feel the response that flows from the different centers. Family, money, spouse, work, self, possessions, church, enemy, friend, pleasure, principles. Suppose tonight you have invited your wife to go to a concert. You have all the tickets. She's excited about going. It's 4 o'clock in the afternoon. All of a sudden, your boss calls you into his office and says he needs your help through the evening to get ready for an important meeting at 9 a.m. tomorrow. If you're looking through spouse centered or family centered glasses, your main concern will be your wife. You may tell the boss you may tell the boss you can't stay and you take her to the concert in an effort to please her. You may feel you may feel you have to stay to protect your job, but you'll do so grudgingly, anxious about her response, trying to justify your decision and protecting yourself from her disappointment or anger. If you're looking through a money-centered lens, your main thought will be of the time you'll get, or the influence working late, or the influence working late will have on a potential raise. You may call your wife and simply tell her you have to stay, assuming she'll understand that economic demands come first. If you're work centered, you may be thinking of the opportunity. You can learn more about the job. You can make some points with the boss and further your career. You may give yourself a pat on the back for putting in hours well beyond what is required, evidence of what a hard worker you are. Your wife should be proud of you. If you're possession centered, or might be thinking of the things that, if you're possession centered, you might be thinking of the things that overtime income could buy, or you might consider what an asset to your reputation at the office it would be if you stayed. Everyone would hear tomorrow how noble, how sacrificing, and dedicated you are. Is that narcissism? I don't know. Um, if you're pleasure centered, you'll probably can the work and go to the concert. I think that's an error, right? On the That's what it says. You'll probably can the work. Oh wait, no, canning. Okay, I gotta think a little bit deeper. I think that's correct. You'll probably can the work and go to the concert, even if your wife would be happy for you to work late. You deserve a night out. If you're friend centered, your decision will be influenced by whether or not you had invited friends to attend the concert with you, or whether your friends at work were going to stay late too. If you're enemy centered, you may stay late because you know it will give you a big edge over that person in the office who thinks he's the company's greatest asset. While he's off having fun, you'll be working and slaving, doing his work and yours, sacrificing your personal pleasure for the good of the company. He can so blithely ignore. If you're church centered, if you're church centered, you might be influenced by plans other church members have to attend the concert, by whether or not any church members work at your office, by what by whether or not your church any church members work at your office, or by the nature of the concert. Handel's Messiah might rate higher priority than a rock concert. Your decision might also be affected by what you think a good church member would do and by whether you view the extra work as service or seeking after material wealth. Guys, I'm dying. Woo. Sorry about that. I know some people absolutely despise um, that sound, and I realized it only after doing it. My bad. I apologize. Um, your decision. I'm gonna reread the sentence. Your decision might also be affected by what you think a good church member would do, and by whether you view the extra work as service or seeking after material wealth. If you're self-centered, you'll be focused on what you will do. What you'll be focused on what will do you the most good. Would it be better for you to go out for the evening, or would it be better for you to make a few points with the boss? How are different? How the different options affect you will be your main concern. As we consider various ways of looking at a single event, is it any wonder that we have young lady, old lady perception problems in our interactions with each other? Can you see how fundamentally our centers affect us? Right down to our motivations, our daily decisions, our actions, or in too many cases, our reactions, our interpretations of events. That's why understanding your own center is so important. And if that center does not empower you as a proactive person, it becomes fundamental to your effectiveness to make the necessary paradigm shifts to create a center that will. As a principle centered person, you try to stand apart from the emotion or as a principle centered person, you try to stand apart from the emotion of the situation and from other factors that would act on you and evaluate the options, looking at the balanced whole, the work needs, the family needs, the other needs that may be involved, and the possible implications of the various alternative decisions. You'll try to come up with the best solutions. You'll try to come up with the best solution, taking all factors into consideration. Whether you go to the concert or stay and work is really a small part of an effective decision. You might make the same choice with a number of other centers, but there are several important differences when you're coming from a principle centered paradigm. First, you're not being acted upon by other people or other, oh, excuse me. First, you're not being acted upon by other people or circumstances. You're proactively choosing what you determine to be the best alternative. You're proactively choosing what you determine to be the best alternative. You make your decision consciously and knowledgeably. Second, you know your decision is most effective because it is based on principles with predictive long term results. Third, what you choose to do contributes to your ultimate values in life. Staying at work to get the edge on someone at the office is an entirely different evening in your life from staying because you value your boss's effectiveness and you genuinely want to contribute to the company's welfare. Okay, let me reread that sentence. Third, what you choose to do contributes to your Third, what you choose to do contributes to your ultimate values in life. Staying at work to get the edge on someone at the office is an entirely different evening in your life from staying because you value your you value your boss's effectiveness and you genuinely want to value calm down and you genuinely want to contribute to the company's welfare. The experiences you have as you carry out your decisions take on quality and meaning in the context of your life as a whole. Fourth, you can communicate to your wife and your boss within the strong networks you've created in your interdependent relationships. Because you because you're independent, you can be effectively interdependent. You might decide to delegate what is del- delegable. You might want to, because you're independent, you can be effectively interdependent. You might decide to delegate what is delegable. Delegate what is delegable. Delegate what is delegable. Delegate what is delegable. You might decide to delegate what is delegable and come in early the next morning to do the rest. And come in early the next morning to do the rest. To do the rest. To do the rest. To do the rest. You might decide to delegate what is You might decide to delegate what is delegable and come in the you might decide to delegate what is delegable and come in early the next morning to do the rest. And finally, you'll feel comfortable about your decision. Whatever you choose to do, you can focus on it and enjoy it. As a principle centered person, you see things differently. And because you see things differently, you think differently, you act differently. Because you have a high degree of security, guidance, wisdom, and power that flows from a solid, unchanging core, you have the foundation of a you have the foundation of a highly proactive and highly effective life. Okay, how writing and using a personal mission statement. Okay, I'm gonna take a break. Um, I might come back today, or I might um come back tomorrow. Not entirely sure, but yeah. Um, thank you guys for watching. Yeah, thank you so much. Bye bye.